Sandor. This is Maunalua, past, present, and future. I'm from Livable Hawaii Kai Hui, and today we're going to be talking about Mālama the Marshes and field ecology and research on Oahu. We have Marty Kawasaki joining us today from HCSU. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I grew up on Oahu. About 15 years ago, I moved to the Big Island for my undergrad work. And in my undergrad, I did an internship in a wetland back here on Oahu and just fell in love with it. And so after about 14 years, I came back here to start working on a water movement project. So, and I know, Amanda, we met about 2 years ago when you started working on another waterbird project, but and now you're going to be working with myself, and I know you. Let me know let's catch up. Like, what have you been doing for the past, what got you out here? Because you're a mainland girl.
Sure, yeah. So I started about 2 years ago. I had family that moved out here, my older siblings, and I wanted to, I'm from New Jersey, so I wanted to take full advantage of having family in Hawaii and having somewhere to stay and people to hang out with. So I actually came across, I was looking for something environmental to do since I was an environmental studies student at the time with a concentration in ecology at Allegheny College, which is this tiny school in Pennsylvania. And so I came across an ad looking for volunteers for a waterbird study with the Hawaiian gallinule with Charles Van Rees from Tufts University. And so I came out and I had no idea what to expect, and it was just amazing. It was so much fun, and that's how I got in connection with Livable Hawaii Kai Hui. So I was lucky enough to be able to come back this past summer, now that I've graduated college and I've moved here. I've been here about 9 months, and yeah, now I'm working with Livable Hawaii Kai Hui and working with you in the field, and it's been great.
Yeah.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about the current project?
Yeah, so the current project is a movement ecology study. The project's called the Movement Ecology of Hawaiian Waterbirds. We have a little logo that we made about a year ago. And so it's actually run through the USGS, the U.S. Geological Survey, and a lot of the funding is coming from Navy lands and also the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Yeah, that's our adorable IO flying over its wetland. And so that's the current project we're working on is looking at the movements of waterbirds between wetlands on the island of Oahu.
Okay, great. And so where about on the island do you do most of your work? So
most of our work kind of focuses on three main waterbird habitats in Pearl Harbor. Although, because we're looking at movement, we're very interested in how they move around the rest of the island. So we do have towers. Most of our towers are in Pearl Harbor, but we do have a couple of towers on other sides of the island. So we have one out in Kahuku on the North Shore. We have one, or we're going to be putting one up in the windward side, so just above the mountain ranges, so that it'll cover the three main wetlands in that area. And so that makes up the main triangle, but there are little pockets, such as Keawava Wetland and Hawaii Kai, and Paiko Lagoon out on that side that also have wetland habitats for our waterbirds. So, there's a lot of little pockets of wetland habitat, but we're focusing on those three main hubs of population for these three waterbird species.
Great. Okay. And so when you catch a bird, when you're out in the field, what do you do?
Okay, so when we catch the birds, we usually take measurements on them. So once you catch a bird, because these birds are critically endangered, you don't really get to handle them all that much. So we take things like bill measurements, leg measurements. We put transmitter tags on them. So shield measurements, transmitter tags, and we also look at the colorations of the birds. With the Lai Ke'o, we look at the shield coloration. With the IO, we look at their leg color and their bill length, and also plumage differences that we may see with them.
Okay, and in a couple of your images, I saw they look like little bracelets on the birds. Can you tell me about those?
Oh yeah, so those little color bands on the legs or of the IO, the stilt, are actually identifications. So say my transmitter tag falls off of a bird, so the little backpack the little kind of weird dial and wire you see on the bird. If that were to fall off, the bird could still be studied, could still be located, and its movement could still be documented by citizen scientists that, were out birding, looking at the birds, and they would record, hey, I saw this bird with this, weird, orange over something shiny, green over blue, or whatever the color is. And that would be that bird's specific identification. Because when they don't have leg bands, these birds all look the same for the most part.
Okay, cool. And what are you looking for when you do get data, or someone tells you, I saw this bird out here? What are you looking for in your data?
So what we're looking for in the data is how these birds are using their habitat. So how they're moving around on Oahu. So why a particular wetland is important to them. So again, a lot of the wetlands we're working in are protected areas. And in these protected areas, what are the managers doing there that are promoting these birds to go there? So we're looking at why birds are staying in an area, and then why are they moving from place to place. So that's part of, leg banding helps us determine that. But these birds aren't always in their core habitats. They're sometimes flying to new places. So that's, why potentially a golfer that sees a bird at a golf course maybe could report a bird to us and be like, or to Fish and Wildlife Service, to any state agent, to any biological agency in the state of Hawaii, to say, hey, I saw this bird with this weird color, with bracelets on it, as you said, with bracelets.
Yeah.
And that information could get back to me about how a bird that maybe I banded in Kahuku on the North Shore ended up maybe in Keawa'awa or Paiko Lagoon on the Hawaii Kai side.
Okay. And so you mentioned also that they have the little radio tags. Can you tell me a little bit about how they work?
Yeah, so radio tags, we have receiving towers. So we have these towers that we have at our core wetlands or in areas that we consider flybys, where if a bird is present, the tag will be picked up. And so they're radio tags. So it's kind of like the radio dial in your car. It switches between different frequencies, and these tags are coded by number. So if a bird were to get picked up at my receiving unit at a particular wetland, it would record a timestamp when that bird was picked up. And so with that, I can determine, how long it takes a bird to fly from one habitat to the next, or how long a bird is staying at a particular site. Like if it's there all the time, that bird lives there, that's its house. It's a homebody, and ever it lives, it has everything it needs at that one wetland. Whereas if I have a bird that moves, where there's patches of the timestamp that are, empty, that tells me that bird is going somewhere where we don't have a tower, and where, I need to go and try to find it because it's using another habitat that, we don't know about. And so it could be a new habitat, a new wetland that nobody knows exists, or somebody knows it exists, but they're just keeping it a secret. So these secret wetlands are also very important to our movement study.
Okay, great. So like a secretive wetland might be Keawa'awa, where it's kind of in this really developed area.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the kind of thing where that data is really interesting to me.
Right.
Is seeing little funny areas like that where you might not expect it.
Right, where you might not expect a bird to be at or hang out at.
Yeah.
Definitely. That's the kind of thing we're interested in with this study, is adding on these secret pockets of wetland habitat, or these pockets of wetland habitat that, aren't necessarily noticed or not, it's not that they're not noticed, it's just that it's not advertised. The birds are not advertising, we're always going here. And so with that, that's where citizen scientists calling up, letting us know the birds are there, or having a tower in a location like Keawa'awa, or on top of a ridgeline, so it could pick up the coastal area as well.
Okay. And how do you get more towers for your project?
So the way we get more towers for the project is, easiest answer is funding. Agency buy-in is another one. So we do have some interest from the Division of Forestry and Wildlife to purchase a tower. So usually that's what it is if a land manager or an agency is interested in having a tower on their property, we provide them the information that they can go and purchase the tower, and we help them set up the tower for them, in addition to tagging birds for them, because that's the other half of it is, you have a tower and you're interested in what birds are coming into your habitat, but you're also, a lot of people are interested in where their birds are going, because they see their birds and then, maybe there's a storm event and their birds leave. Where do their birds go? And so we're seeking to answer questions like that.
Okay, cool. And what results have you seen so far with the towers and the tags that you do have out there?
So the results we've been seeing with our towers is, I think I have some graphs that I brought for you.
Okay.
And so these, what we're looking at, so this one, with this particular coot, you can see what I was saying about how we have birds that don't really move all that much. And yet there's this one event where it goes to another marsh. So green is where it stays all the time, and then it switches over to this blue color for a little bit of the month of August. And that's probably because during that season. And so with this guy, you can see he's pretty much at his main wetland, and all of a sudden he's bouncing back between two different other wetlands, so Ahua Reef and Honouliuli, when it was a bird that was always at Waiava wetland in the Pearl Harbor area. So again, this is a fun one with a stilt where you can see this bird likes to stay out of Ahua Reef, but it has these pockets in the middle of the day where it's going somewhere where you can see we have tagged, it is getting picked up at some of our wetlands, but there's these holes in its time, in the timestamp where it's not at these wetlands. So it could be somewhere in between these areas that maybe there's a golf course, there's a watercress farm, or there's other habitat in between being home where this bird goes to. So when this bird goes to work, I guess it goes somewhere else. And then, again, a bird that bounces between two homes, Honouliuli and Pohala, and then again, in the middle of the day, like clockwork, it's somewhere around Ahua Reef, Ford Island, where it's not getting picked up. Now, unfortunately, Ahua Reef and Ford Island are fairly close to the Honolulu International Runway. So this kind of information is important because, if we can get some interest from the Honolulu International Airport to want to look at birds crossing the runway, this will help us answer the question of, in the middle of the day, is there a wetland close to the runway that we don't know about? Is there a golf course around there that these birds are going to? Because you can see it's Ahua Reef, again, is fairly close to the reef runway. And so is it somewhere over there? And so that's, kind of what we're focusing on this year is these holes in our data and trying to fill them in with re-sighting birds and having citizen scientists or just anybody in the island of Oahu's community keep an eye out for birds that look like they have a wire sticking out of them. And it's really with the stilts, because when you see a stilt with an antenna sticking out of the back end of it, it's very obvious that is a very long tail feather, and those birds don't really have that long of a tail feather. It's a little obvious.
Yeah. Okay. And so you're looking at why they're moving, where they're moving, how they're moving, just all these different aspects, and you're getting all of that from your towers.
Yeah, we're getting timestamps from our towers, is what it is. So we're understanding when they're moving with the timestamps. How they're moving is being answered by, we look at tide flows or storm events. Like there's a couple of wetlands that only fill up when we have these huge storm events in Oahu, where it's a mud flat that is usually dry for the majority of the year. And then during our winter months, when we have those big rain events, it fills up. Pohala wetland is one of those wetlands where, it's dry. And then all of a sudden, when we have these big rain events, so, this is Pohala when it's dry. And then when it rains, it fills up.
Oh, wow.
And it's, you can see the difference of it. And there's all these stilts that show up there. And so these are areas that, when we have these big rains, we have these large movement patterns of these birds. So that's something that, we're checking out.
Okay. And so you're saying that the stilts, they kind of change their location with the tides. Have you noticed something similar with the coots and the gallinules? Like what trends would attract them to a certain area?
So what trends would attract a coot or gallinule to a certain area usually depends on the vegetation in the area. Like so you saw how one of our wetlands, Waiava, is very, is open. It has a large pool of water, which is, we have these large pools of water with like little islands of habitat, and so that's something that coots like. Stilts love these like large mudflat areas. So you see in the foreground of the photo, there's these large mudflat areas, and if you look behind it, there's these large ponds, and so that's what really attracts coots. They love open water. They love tiny little islands that they can dry off on, whereas gallinules like it. They like open water, but they also like tall sedges. And so tall vegetation like bulrush or like our native sedge, Mālama, is another thing that they really like to nest in. And so they're very hidey birds. They'll go and they like to be in the reeds and stuff. So that's why Keawaawa wetland has this habitat. It's a very small scale, but it has that habitat that these Hawaiian gallinules, the Ōlelo, really prefer. And Ōlelo also are freshwater birds. Any sort of change in the salinity could affect them to leave a wetland. And the same can be said about the Hawaiian coot. They like freshwater, but they'll tolerate slightly brackish, slightly salty water. If the salinity gets too high, they pick up and they fly.
Okay, and stilts aren't really so much about the salinity. They don't mind.
Yeah, stilts aren't so sensitive about it, and it's because they forage on tidal mudflats. So when we have those low tide events, in the Pearl Harbor area, when I go and I sample birds, I'd like to go during low tide because I can easily find a bird out on a mudflat because they're long-legged, they're very visible birds. They're very easy to track in that way, very easy to identify with their leg bands. So the stilts aren't really tied to salinity or anything, except that, if there's a high rain event and a place that is usually dry, no water, fills up with water, that adds a new food source that they're not usually getting. So that tends to attract the stilts to a new wetland or a new location for foraging.
Okay. And so we've talked a little bit about tides, we've talked about vegetation. As far as human behavior, I know you had said that you've worked a little bit on golf courses where you've seen these birds hanging out in the water features, and then you've also worked in places like James Campbell Refuge where it's very restricted access for the public. Have you noticed anything different about the birds, like personalities or behaviors?
Yeah, not to get too anthropogenic on it, but you would think that the birds that are in these protected wetlands where they don't see a lot of people would not pay any attention to us because they're like, oh, well, that's, somebody new. They're not used to like humans being predators or humans chasing them. And so you would think in a protected wetland, they're not going to be too sensitive about a person walking around. But I find that those birds are the most sensitive. Those are the wildest birds. Whereas the ones that you see on a golf course, I guess because they're always interacting with people on those golf courses or in urban environments like Hamakua Marsh or Keawaawa, where they're regularly interacting with humans, they really don't care all that much about a person being in an area. They just kind of see you and just go about their business. Like it's happened before where I've been surveying on a golf cart and like had to slow down because a stilt or a coot or a gallinule was too close. I mean, they definitely notice when you're in a golf cart and then you take out your binoculars and you're, really looking at them very hard. They have that prey aspect to them where they're like, wow, you're staring at me for a really long time. I'm going to pick up and leave.
Yeah, and especially when you pull out the binoculars, so your eyes are suddenly
your
huge.
Eyes are suddenly huge. Yeah, it definitely changes them.
That would probably freak me out if I was a bird too.
Yeah.
And so when you're at the golf courses and you're surveying these birds, they're generally like pretty skittish for all of the species, or is it a little bit more like gallinules versus coots?
I mean, they all definitely have their level of fear and their level of reaction to fear. Like stilts will tend to walk away from you. A coot, depending on if it's on a water's edge or if it's, you know, out in the open. Like a coot loves to be in the water. Like that's how it evades predators, is if it's in the water and it sees you, it's just going to stay right there because it knows it's safe in the water. It can swim a lot faster than you can on that water. A stilt, again, will like just walk away from you, probably run away, maybe take to flight. Gallinules run. And, you know, they have these like long toes, splayed toes that they just like, they can take off like a star track athlete and just bolt. And again, coots have these like little webby toes where they just like take to the water. And so the fear response is that stilts fly, coots swim, gallinules run. So that tends to be the response to fear.
Okay. Does their behavior change at all throughout the year? Is there a time when they're more aggressive or more shy?
Speaking for the stilts, because that's where I have a lot of my, I mean, I'm just starting to get to know the coots and the gallinules a little better, but speaking for the stilts, they definitely have a seasonal aggression, and that is during their breeding season. So during nesting season, when they have tiny little baby birds, that tends to be when they are the most aggressive towards anything. Any other bird, humans, mammalian predators, anybody can get struck by a stilt during that time. With the coots and the gallinules, they tend to have aggression against each other. So, you know, it's all about protecting your babies, and that's something that, you know, I've never heard of a coot or a gallinule chasing down a person because they've gotten too close to a nestling. In fact, they tend to. It's been my experience that gallinules tend to be a little bit more baggy, so they'll actually come and approach you for food if they have nestlings or chicks. I'm not too sure what a baby gallinule is called. I'm just going to call it a galley. So when they have little galleys is when they get a little bit more needy, and I've actually seen them when, you know, you're not supposed to be feeding them, but when I've seen people feed them, they'll take the food back to their chicks and feed their chicks. Like, oh, you know, I tested this out. This is actually pretty good. Here, you try some.
Yeah, I want my little galley to experience this.
Yeah, I want my galley to have some of this.
That's really interesting. What would you say the biggest issues or threats are for these bird species?
So with them, I mean, the biggest threat for them, especially in these, because their wetland habitats are so small, that's the main thing, is that they're very limited by how much habitat there is on the island of Oahu. Like, really, the entire coast of Oahu used to be wetland. I mean, that's just how it naturally was geologically. And with the changes, you know, development from us, developing coastal areas like Waikiki and, you know, even the Pearl Harbor area, parts of the North Shore, parts of the windward side being developed, a lot of those wetland habitats have been reduced or severely affected by the introduction of invasive species. So really it's how much habitat is there. That's really what it is carrying capacity of a wetland really affects these birds. Followed shortly by, you know, probably invasives. So invasive plants that they're not used to having to nest in, and invasive animals that are starting to prey on them. And even some of their native predators can impact them. And then with our water use, you know, we have our aquifer that we're drawing from, and there is a saltwater lens. And so as we're consuming more water, these birds are having less, that lens gets lower and lower to the point where, you know, if there's fresh water on top, the way, you know, hydrology works, if there's fresh water on top, at some point there's not enough of a lens where the salt water comes up through that lens. and you have saltwater incursion into a freshwater pond, and that could definitely affect the Hawaiian gallinule and the Hawaiian coot. So these are, and so, Mālama means to care for. So by caring for the marshes, so by, supporting restoration activities like the ones going on in Keawaava by the Hawaii Kai Hui to promote more wetland habitats. You guys are actually doing really great work by helping sustain that population of gallinules. Now, if you guys do too good of a job, you guys are going to have more gallinules and more water birds coming in there, which for me is exciting, but as land managers, I'm not entirely sure if that's if you guys want to go that far. I mean, obviously, it's excellent if you do. However, it adds another element because you guys are you're managing for Hawaiian gallinules, but if you have Hawaiian coots come in, then you have to create a little bit of a corner that's coot habitat so that the coots have somewhere to go and they're not competing with the gallinules, because they will compete with each other for resources.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
It is interesting that you say that. We're here talking about Mālama, and that's how I came on with Livable Hawaii Kai Hui. Was started just as volunteer leader. So for our second Saturdays every month, where we do the restoration of Keawaava, and we work to make it better habitat for the gallinules, and trying to attract more birds come our way, and just really keep that area livable. That's how I came on, was just leading volunteers, and then it turned into helping with this grant project that we have from World Wetlands Day 2017 to 2018 World Wetlands Day. So yeah, that's definitely what we're trying to do, is just restore it and Mālama the Marshes.
Yeah.
So I really want to thank you, Marty, for coming out and talking with us about birds and about what you're doing out here. It's been really interesting hearing from you and getting to know a little bit more about what you're doing.
Well, thank you again, Amanda, for inviting me to speak to you, and I'm very happy that you're progressing in your wetland knowledge.
Thank you. This has been great. Thank you guys for joining us on our episode today. Again, this is Maunalua Past, Present, Future, and it's been great. Thank you.